Welcome to our first video in the series covering the chemical reactions of photosynthesis, a series of chemical reactions that occur exclusively in plants and similar organisms and generally regarded as the single most important chemical reaction on Earth because of it forming the basis for the existence of life. And all we need to do is look at what the actual reaction is in order to understand why, starting with the first reactant required in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide, that plants are able to absorb from the atmosphere. Now, on its own, this particular fact is very, very useful for understanding how plants play an important role in stabilizing atmospheric temperature, because the more CO2 plants absorb from the atmosphere, the more they decrease the concentration of atmospheric CO2 and prevent a runaway greenhouse effect from cooking all life on Earth. Now, once the carbon dioxide has been absorbed by plants, it reacts with water that exists within plant cells, and plants convert this carbon dioxide into a useful form in the form of a monosaccharide carbohydrate, most notably glucose, and therefore this makes plants foundational not just for all autotrophic organisms, that being organisms such as plants that produce their own energy source in order to be able to survive, but also makes plants essential for any heterotrophic organism, including humans, which are organisms, unlike plants, that cannot produce their own source of glucose. And for this reason, plants and other photosynthetic organisms are seen as foundational because they are the original source of glucose and any carbohydrate that exists on Earth. And generally, apart from other organisms that can do photosynthesis, plants are critical because of their role in what we call carbon fixation, which is taking carbon dioxide, which is an inorganic form of carbon, reacting it with water and making it now bioavailable, because we have now converted carbon dioxide into an organic form that can be accessed by other organisms. However, this is actually not the most foundational reason about why photosynthesis is important. That reason is because of the waste product, oxygen gas, that is produced from the photosynthesis process, which allows any oxygen-breathing organism, also called aerobic organisms, to actually be able to survive on Earth. Now, in order to understand the chemical reactions that occur in photosynthesis, we need to take a look at the structure of chloroplasts. And just like mitochondria that pretty much every aerobic organism has, chloroplasts used to be bacteria, specifically a type of photosynthetic bacteria called cyanobacteria that are largely believed to be responsible for oxygenating Earth's atmosphere. And just like gram-negative bacteria and like mitochondria, they have two membranes, or they have more specifically a double membrane system, the inner membrane, which we see here, and the outer membrane, which in a bacterium would actually be the outer layer of their cell wall. But now they have basically come to form two distinct membrane structures, and again, the only other organelle in eukaryotic organisms that has this structure is mitochondrion, owing to their shared ancestry as both being bacteria long ago. Now, similar to the mitochondrion, the overwhelming majority of the inside of chloroplasts is made of water and is what we call the stroma. And this is where the chemical reactions that actually produce glucose occur. And these are what we call the light-independent reactions, because as long as the products that are necessary to produce glucose are present, because those products were produced through light reactions, the reactions that produce glucose will generally occur regardless of whether there is a light source or not. However, the foundational basis of photosynthesis are these structures here that many people liken to a stack of pancakes, and these structures are what we call thylakoids, and thylakoids, as mentioned, are the foundational basis for photosynthesis because their job is to absorb the energy that hits the chloroplast from sunlight. And normally thylakoids don't occur by themselves. They are normally existing in large stacks like this that we call grana. Grana is actually plural. The singular form of this would be granum, although we don't use this because they normally occur in large groups within the chloroplasts. Now, a final technical term to talk about is the nature of light and why chloroplasts and the leaves that contain chloroplasts appear green. So, even under a light microscope that's powerful enough to see individual chloroplasts, such as in algae cells like this, chloroplasts appear green because they reflect green light. This is according to the light theory of color, which means that despite the fact that they look green, they do not actually absorb the green spectrum of light. So remember that visible light is actually a combination of all of the colors of the rainbow, starting with red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, which is a color halfway between blue and violet are generally regarded as the colors of the rainbow. But again, color is a spectrum and not so much an either-or phenomenon. But the idea is that if chloroplasts reflect green light, by definition, they must absorb the other colors of light. So what this means is that chloroplasts, if they were made of 100% pigment that reflects green light, this means that it's actually impossible for them to absorb all of the energy from sunlight that hits them. Now, this is relatively inefficient because if you are a chloroplast where you depend on this reaction in order to produce your energy source, you want to get as much energy from light as possible. So the simple solution to this, and this solution is very, very obvious in the autumn when we see leaves that are different colors, the solution that chloroplasts and plants as a whole have is to use chemicals that have different colors, or more specifically, different pigment molecules that each reflect a different color of light. And therefore, leaves that are red have a dominant pigment that reflects red light and generally absorbs the other colors of light that are not red. And this balance of multiple pigments ensures that chloroplasts are able to maximize their absorption of energy from sunlight and therefore maximize their production of glucose. In the next video, we're going to look at the beginning mechanisms of how the pigments in the thylakoids of chloroplasts work and look at the beginning of what we call the light-dependent photosynthesis reactions.